I'm optimistic we get 10 this afternoon. Smaller. It's fine to use a national aid for off-business costs.
No, not for officers, Gillespie.
Oh, Gillespie. Okay.
The only thing I'm going to use for crews is just the
Okay, perfect. You may be seated, everyone. Okay, is everyone ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes? Okay, let's bring the jury in. A few more minutes. Okay. All right, you may be seated, everyone. State, you may call your next witness.
State called Officer David Cruz.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good morning, sir. You may be seated.
Morning, ma'am.
Please state your name for the record.
Officer David Cruz.
Would you spell your last name for the jury, or for the court reporter, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. C-R-U-Z.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
afternoon. Officer Cruz, where do you work?
The Orlando Police Department.
How long have you worked there?
September is going to be 10 years.
Did you work for any other police agencies before Orlando Police Department?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
Castleberry Police Department.
How long did you work for them?
Approximately 1 year and a half.
As you sit today, what are your job duties for the Orlando Police Department?
Currently, I'm assigned to the International Drive area.
And what are your duties in the International Drive area?
We focus on tourist-oriented policing. We ride bicycles in the area. We also focus on any high crimes that might be going on, vehicle burglaries, purse snatchings, shopliftings.
Is that the same location that you were assigned on June 4th of 2015
Yes, ma'am.
with the same duties?
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to becoming a law enforcement officer, did you attend any college?
I did attend some, yes.
And can you tell us what that was?
Sure, I attended Valencia Community College.
Did you undergo any training before becoming a police officer?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
I put myself through the police academy,
How long is that?
approximately 21 weeks.
Other than the police academy and your schooling at Valencia Community College, do you also have to undergo training as part of your job duties regularly?
Constantly, yes, we do.
More specifically, have you ever undergone any training involving defensive tactics?
Yes, ma'am. Every year, part of our police training to upkeep our certification, we have to go through defensive tactics training.
How long is that course to get your certification?
To upkeep our certification is a yearly class we take.
Do you have to undergo any training to get the certification?
It just upkeeps itself as long as we require the minimum 8 hours per year required for defensive tactics training.
I want to draw your attention to June 4th, 2015.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you working that night?
Yes, I was.
Where were you working?
During the day, I worked my regular shift on International Drive.
Did you also work at venue 578 on that night?
Yes, I did.
What kind of shift was that?
That's an off-duty shift.
What is an off-duty shift?
Off-duty is something that the department and the city lets us do, and it's kind of on our own accord through the city of Orlando.
How do you get those shifts?
Either word of mouth or we could sign up through them. We have a sign up through the City of Orlando website.
So did you actually sign up to work at venue 578 on June 4th, 2015?
That particular job, no. We know the coordinator, and I volunteered to work that night.
Had you worked that venue before?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
Approximately throughout 2 years.
Do you know who pays you when you work the off-duty shifts?
The club pays us.
And this is something that's approved by the Orlando Police Department.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go straight from your regular shift to the venue?
Yes, I did.
Were you in a patrol car?
Yes, I was.
Is that your patrol car?
It is my assigned police vehicle.
Take it home.
Yes, ma'am.
When you work an off-duty shift, do you have to let the Orlando Police Department know when you go on duty for that off-duty shift?
Yes, we're required to sign on through our communication center, and they have to know we're there, and they also issue us what's called an Oscar number.
What is that?
An Oscar number is an individual identification number in which if we need to call for help or any circumstance or they need to alert us, they could call us to the Oscar number, and we're alerted to whatever they need.
So it's no secret to Orlando Police Department when you work an off-duty shift?
No, ma'am, it's extremely common.
And they know that you're working it when you're working it?
Sometimes, yes. Well, when we sign on, they know we're there.
Did you sign on June 4th, 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
You got an Oscar number?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you worked an off-duty shift immediately following your regular shift before?
Yes, ma'am.
No problem?
No.
Mr. Cruz, I'm going to ask if you could bring the mic a little closer. I'm having a hard time hearing you, sorry.
Is this a little better?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Can you tell us a little bit about your duties as an off-duty police officer at venue 578 that night?
Yes. We're a law enforcement presence. We're uniformed. We're in our police vehicle. We usually stand in front of the club, and we are a deterrent to any potential people, violence, crime, or if they need us for any other circumstances that require law enforcement, we're there.
Are you authorized to assist with any help the club might need both inside and outside?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you the only officer working off-duty at venue 578 that night?
No, I was not.
Who was working with you?
Officer Charles Mays.
Where were you stationed at venue 578 that night?
I was stationed directly in front of the front entrance of the club.
Permission to publish State's Exhibit 2.
Yes.
Officer Cruz, I'm going to ask that you
Sure.
And were you stationed in your patrol car?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Were you sitting inside of the patrol car?
Yes, I was.
Still a little dark, but can you turn around and look at that photo? Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that photo?
That's the photo of the front of venue 578.
What's that road you see in front of it?
That's North Orange Avenue.
And Officer Cruz, if there's still a laser pointer on the,
No, ma'am.
neighbor's witness mark,
Yes.
and then the laser pointer, if you can use that and indicate on that photo where your car was.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Where was Officer Mays?
Officer Mays was located in the rear parking lot of venue 578.
Can we see that rear parking lot in this photo?
No, you cannot.
How did you know he was there?
When I come in, typically, I drive by to the back Concord Street, and I notice his marked patrol vehicle.
Now, earlier you said that you're in your police uniform.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it the uniform that you're wearing right now?
No, it is not.
What were you wearing June 4th, 2015?
I was wearing my International Drive Bike uniform.
Can you describe it for us?
Yes, ma'am. It is a black polo shirt, and it has my name on it, along with an embroidered badge, and it also has Orlando Police written on each sleeve in approximately 1-inch print, and also on the back I have Orlando Police written in gray, approximately 3-inch print across the back.
Were you wearing your weapons belt that night?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it the same one that you're wearing today?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, can I have the defendant stand up so that the jury can see his belt? Or the witness, I'm sorry.
The witness may stand.
Officer Cruz, can you describe everything that is in your belt as it is today?
Yes, ma'am. May I remain standing?
Yes, please.
That's speculations in the same background.
Officer Cruz, is that the exact same belt that you were wearing on June 4th, 2015?
Yes, it was.
Does it have the exact same things in it today as it did on June 4th, 2015?
There's only one thing that changed from there to then. It's my issued firearm.
Did you have a firearm on June 4th, 2015?
Yes, I did.
Was it just a different firearm?
It was a different serial number, yes.
Can you please go through your belt and tell us everything that's on it?
Yes, ma'am. I have a flashlight. I have a issued police radio. I have my issued taser. I have a pair of handcuffs. I have issued Saber Red spray, pepper spray. I have 2 magazines with ammunition. Then I have my issued firearm, which you see on my holster. It's holstered in. I have my issued baton, which extends in order to come back. Push it back. I also have another set of handcuffs. And I have a latex glove holder in case we have to touch any person that's possibly contaminated with blood or anything. That is all.
Thank you, Officer Cruz. You can have a seat. I want to talk about your taser.
Yes,
How many
ma'am.
cartridges do you have on your belt?
Issued 2 cartridges.
As your taser sits in your belt, and as it did on June 4th, 2015, does it already have a cartridge loaded?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Now, when you arrived at venue 578, did you have to check in with anyone from security?
Security is already at the door in the front while they are checking people that enter the venue.
Did you know who was working the door that night?
I do recall some people, yes.
Can you tell us who you recall?
Sure. Vaughn Daly,
How did you know Von Daly?
just through the club.
Were you friends at all?
I was professional as far as every time I worked there, I did see him working.
At some point, during the night while you're sitting in your patrol car, does Von Daly knock on your window?
Yes, he does.
And what does he say to you when he knocks on your window?
He stated to me that there was a situation going on down the street.
Did he tell you which direction?
He pointed northbound on Orange Avenue.
Can you use the laser pointer and show us the direction he pointed?
Yes, ma'am. Pointed up.
Where was Mr. Daly when he knocked on your window?
It was approximately right in this area right here.
After he knocked on your window and told you, hey, there's something going on down the street, what did you do?
At that point, I immediately exited my police vehicle.
Did you look in the direction he pointed you towards?
Yes, I did.
What did you see?
I noticed there was a male in a confrontation with a female, and he was grabbing her.
Can you describe the male?
Yes, he was a black male.
Was he larger than the female?
He was.
Do you recall what he was wearing?
Yes, I do.
What was he wearing?
He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt.
Do you see that black male in this room today?
I do.
Can you please point to him and identify him by an article of clothing, perhaps his tie?
Sure. He's wearing a blue-colored tie.
Let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
Record so reflect.
Can you describe the female? Was she white, black, or Hispanic?
She was a Hispanic female.
And you said you saw the defendant grabbing her arm?
He was grabbing her by the wrist.
What was she doing?
She was attempting to pull away back southbound on Orange Avenue.
Officer Cruz, where were these individuals when you saw the defendant grab a hold of the female's wrist?
They were on Orange Avenue north of Concord.
If you can turn around, do you see that location on this picture?
Yes, I do.
Can you please point it with the laser pointer?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. What did you do after you saw the defendant grab her arm?
I immediately walked on the sidewalk towards their location.
Did you make contact with them?
Yes, I did.
Where did you make contact with them?
On the corner of Concord and Orange.
Now, when you get out of your patrol vehicle and you look in the direction Von Daly pointed you and you see the defendant grabbing the female's arm, pulling her towards him, what are your concerns at this point?
Her safety.
Have you seen altercations in your line of work before?
Yes, I have.
Have you investigated altercations between males and females?
Yes, I have.
Have you seen anyone get hit before?
Yes, I have.
Have you seen a situation escalate very quickly?
Yes.
Was that a concern of yours at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
When you make contact with the individuals, with the defendant and the female on the corner of Orange and Concord, what do you do?
I have both parties separate
Why do you do this?
in order to diffuse the situation, in order to speak with them individually.
Did you bring them anywhere to separate them?
Yes.
Where'd you bring them?
I asked Mr. Carter to go stand on the corner of Orange and Concord on the south end, and then I walked with Mrs. Espejo on Concord down, westbound.
I'm going to show you another picture of Officer Cruz. Can you show us on this photo where you had the defendant stand?
Yes.
And where did you bring the female? About how many feet away from the defendant was the female?
15, 20.
Were you still by yourself at this point?
Yes, I was.
Had you called for backup?
Yes,
Did you get a response that backup was coming?
I did.
Who'd you get that response from?
Officer Mays.
Given the fact that you were by yourself, would it have been safe to separate the individuals to the point where they could not see each other?
At that point, no, it was not safe.
Would that have caused you to lose sight of one of them?
Yes, it would have.
Did the defendant stand at the corner with no issue?
He attempted to continue walking back towards Mrs. Espejo and I.
Did you have to say anything to him?
I had to repeat to him approximately 2 to 3 times to stand on the corner.
At some point, did you have an opportunity to attempt to speak with the female?
Yes, I did.
What was her demeanor at this point?
She was upset, visibly upset, crying.
Did you ask her what was going on between her and the defendant?
Yes, I did.
What did she tell you?
She stated that they had been previously in a relationship, approximately 2 years, and they had ended, and they were at the club together, but the defendant had been all over her, and she was not welcoming of that type of behavior.
Did she indicate to you whether she wanted the defendant to leave her alone?
Yes, she did.
Did she want him to leave her alone?
Yes.
When did Officer Mays arrive on scene?
Officer Mays arrived shortly after I had began speaking with Mrs. Spejo.
What did you have Officer Mays do?
I had Officer Mays go stand with Mr. Carter.
At some point, did you finish your conversation with Mrs. Spejo, the female?
Yes, I did.
And just to be clear, at some point later on in the night, were you able to ID that female as being Joanna Spejo?
Yes, I did.
How did you ID her?
By photo identification.
Would that be her driver's license?
Yes, ma'am.
After speaking with Mrs. Spejo, what did you do next?
Once we were done speaking with Mrs. Spejo, she was on the phone attempting to call somebody to come pick her up. I let her know to continue calling, get somebody to come pick her up.
At any point, did you go and attempt to speak to the defendant?
After that, yes, I immediately went to speak with Mr. Carter.
And what was Mr. Carter's demeanor?
He was non-reactive to our law enforcement presence or our presence at all.
What do you mean non-reactive?
He continued staring at Mrs. Spejo.
Did he appear to acknowledge your presence?
No, he did not.
At some point, did you attempt to get his attention?
Yeah, I waved my hand in front of his face.
How far away from the defendant were you when you did that?
I was standing to his left side,
Within a foot?
within a foot.
What was the defendant's response to that?
He was non-reactive.
At any point, did you tell him that he could not speak to Mrs. Spejo?
Yes, I did.
Why did you feel the need to tell him that?
Because he continued staring at her in a manner, and just his body language, he was facing, his shoulder was squared off towards her.
What are your concerns at this point?
My concerns is that he appeared as if he was going to go back and attack her, or worse.
And when you told the defendant, Mr. Carter, that he couldn't speak to Mrs. Spejo, what was his response?
His response is, I'm going to go talk to her.
Did you tell him again that he could not speak with Mrs. Spejo?
I did reiterate to him once again, yes, he could not go and speak to Mrs. Spejo.
And what was the defendant's response to that?
He said he was going to go talk to her, and I was not going to stop him.
You were not going to stop him?
Correct.
What are your concerns at this point?
At this point, I'm concerned for her safety, our safety.
Did the defendant appear to be complying with any of your commands?
No, he did not.
Was he still looking at Mrs. Spejo?
Yes, he was.
At any point, did he move towards Mrs. Spejo after you told him he couldn't speak to her?
Yes, after the second time I stated to him, and he stated that he was going to speak to her and we weren't going to stop him, he started to move towards her.
What did you have to do in response to that?
Officer Mays and I blocked his path and stood in front of him.
After the defendant tried to move towards Mrs. Spejo after you had already told him twice that he could not speak with her, what did you do?
At that point in time, I grabbed a hold of his left arm and told him he was under arrest.
Were you able to secure his left arm behind his back?
No, I was not.
Why not?
Mr. Carter turned his body towards me, and he tensed up.
What are your concerns at this point?
He was actively resisting our attempts to place him under arrest.
After the defendant turns his body towards you, what is your response?
My response was he could attack me or potentially swing at me.
So what did you do?
At that point, I pushed him away from me.
Was that to gain distance?
Yes.
Now, up until this point, had you had the chance to pat Mr. Carter down for any weapons?
No, ma'am.
Not relevant especially.
Over.
What was Officer Mays doing at this point?
Officer Mays was standing Mr. Carter's right side.
Was he going hands-on with Mr. Carter?
Not at that time, no.
What does the term contact and cover mean?
Contact and cover is a term that we use in law enforcement, which describes as two officers together. One is contact, one is cover.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What was your role that night?
I was contact. Contact is the officer that makes contact with the individual or the situation going on at hand.
What was Mays' role?
Officer Mays was cover. Cover is always ready in case they have to take action, either non-lethal, lethal, or go hands-on.
Is this for safety reasons?
Yes, it is.
Now, after you give the defendant a push to gain some distance, what does the defendant do?
The defendant takes a few steps kind of offset to the right, and he stands there, and then he puts his arms up by his side and in.
When the defendant puts his arms up, do you try to secure his hands again?
At that point, I found it extremely odd what was going on and figured that he now was going to be compliant based on the positions his arms were and where he was standing. So I decided to walk in front of the defendant, Mr. Carter, once again in order to re-engage and assess him and let him know we are law enforcement and we are attempting to put him under arrest.
Did you say anything to him at this point?
We were telling him at the time, put your hands behind your back, stop resisting.
Did he put his hands behind his back?
No, he did not.
Did you attempt to put his hands behind his back again?
I once again grabbed a hold of his arm and attempted to place his hands behind his back.
What did he do?
He tensed up and attempted to pull away at that time.
When the defendant tenses his body and attempts to pull away again, what is your response?
I immediately put him in a bear hug
Why'd you do this?
in order to restrain him from further either trying to attack us and to redirect him towards the ground.
Are you still giving verbal commands?
Yes, we are.
What is Mays doing at this point?
At that point, I hear Officer Mays yell, spray.
What do you know that to mean?
Spray, based on training experience, is going to be pretty much that Officer Mays is going to deploy his pepper spray.
What do you do when you hear that?
At that point, I clutch my head away and continue holding on Mr. Carter.
Does Officer Mays spray the defendant?
Yes, he does.
What do you do after that?
At that point, I try to redirect Mr. Carter to the ground in order to secure him.
Were you able to get him to the ground?
No, I was not.
Why?
Mr. Carter broke away from my bear hug and took off running westbound on Concord Street.
Officer Cruz, can you, using the laser pointer, show us where you took the defendant into a bear hug on this map? Can you see it, the area?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you show us where that is?
Yeah, it was approximately in this area right here.
And after the defendant was able to break free from your bear hug, which direction did he go?
He traveled westbound this direction.
Where was Mrs. Spejo?
Mrs. Spejo was standing in this area right here against the fence there.
So would he have been moving in the direction of Mrs. Spejo?
Yes, ma'am.
What are your concerns at this point?
We're concerned for her safety, our safety, and everyone else is involved.
At some point after the defendant ran westbound on Concord, did he stop?
He turned around and faced me.
What did you do at this point?
At that point, I attempted a tackle.
With your body?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was Officer Mays at this point?
Officer Mays, I believe, was behind me.
How far, can you see where the defendant got before when he turned around on this map, on this picture?
Yes, ma'am. Approximately, it was down in this area right here. There's another door, side entrance to venue 578 here.
Thank you. Is that where you attempted to take him down with a tackle?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that effective?
No, it was not.
What happened when you tackled the defendant?
Mr. Carter fell on his buttocks, and he, with momentum, just got right back up.
Did he do anything when he got right back up?
We attempted to, again, try to restrain him, but he pulled away and ran back eastbound on Concord.
Using the pointer, can you show us the direction he ran this time?
Sure, he began to come back this way.
Where was Mrs. Spejo?
Mrs. Spejo at the time, I believe, was with security being protected over here.
So was he running in the direction of Mrs. Spejo?
Yes, he was.
Did he run past you?
He did pass me, yes.
What about Officer Mays?
I don't remember if he was parallel or right beside where he was.
What are your concerns at this point?
At this point, we have an active resistor, and he's actively resisting our lawful orders to take him and lawful commands to take him into custody.
Are you still concerned for your safety?
Yes.
What about Officer Mays' safety?
Yes.
What about Mrs. Spejo's safety?
Yes, ma'am.
What about the safety of the patrons of Venue 578?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, had you had a chance to pat the defendant down to see if he had any weapons?
No, ma'am.
Just to be clear, do you know the defendant prior to June 4th, 2015?
No, ma'am. Never met him.
Never seen him before?
Never seen him.
Now, after the defendant is able to get up and begin running, which is now east on Concord, did you attempt to use another method in an effort to gain compliance?
Yes, ma'am. At that point, I deployed my department-issued taser.
Did that have any effect?
No, it did not.
Why not? Or how do you know that?
It did not have the desired effect.
What did the defendant do after you deployed your taser?
He continued running, moving eastbound on Concord.
When that first taser didn't work, what did you do next?
I discarded the cartridge that was in the taser, and I reloaded a new one.
Are you able to do that pretty quickly?
Yes.
Did you deploy the second cartridge?
Yes, I did.
When you deployed the second cartridge, was the defendant running away from you?
He was sideways at first, and then, yes, he was running away.
Did that second cartridge have any effect on the defendant?
No, it did not.
At some point, did you attempt to dry stun the defendant after the second taser didn't work?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And can you describe to us what a dry stun is?
Sure. A dry stun is a mode of the taser in which we could place the taser up to a person, and the volts going through the taser affects them.
Were you able to get close enough to the defendant in order to do a dry stun?
Yes, ma'am, I attempted a dry stun.
And what happened when you attempted the dry stun?
It was not effective, and Mr. Carter began charging back at me.
Can you describe the way in which he charged back at you?
He began flailing his arms, attempting to grab the taser out of my hands.
Did this cause you to drop the taser?
Yes, it did.
While all of this is going on, are you still giving the defendant verbal commands?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
What are those commands?
Stop resisting, get on the ground.
What is Officer Mays doing at this point?
Officer Mays is right beside me to my left, and he's there. He's with us. Unfortunately, at that point in time, my attention is focused on Mr. Carter, but I know Officer Mays is with us.
After you drop your taser, do you see Officer Mays use any sort of technique in an effort to gain compliance from the defendant?
Yes, I do.
And what was that?
Officer Mays deployed his ass baton and attempted to strike Mr. Carter.
Could you see whether he was able to strike Mr. Carter?
Mr. Carter was moving at the time, running away back eastbound. I'm not sure how well or effective those strikes were.
Did the defendant stop running?
He did.
Where did he stop running?
On the corner of Orange and Concord.
Can you show us on the map with the laser pointer?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Up until this point, has the defendant complied with any of your verbal commands?
No, he did not.
Had you been able to gain compliance with any of the techniques that you just spoke about?
No, I have not.
And what were you trying to do at this point?
Put him in custody.
defendant do once he got to the corner of Orange and Concord?
He braced his back against the light pole or electrical pole that's located there, and he faced Officer Mays and I.
Did you give him verbal commands at this point?
Yes, we did.
What were those commands?
Get on the ground, stop resisting.
Did the defendant get on the ground?
No, he did not.
At some point, did you decide to use another method in an effort to gain compliance from the defendant?
Yes, I did.
What did you use at this point?
My department issued pepper spray.
And where did you spray it onto the defendant?
On the top of his head.
Did that seem to have any effect?
No, it did not.
What did the defendant do after you deployed your pepper spray?
He covered his face and clutched down.
When you say he clutched down, was it like this?
Yes.
What did you do at this point?
At that point, we were continuously giving commands, and Mr. Carter has his hands in front of his face, clutching down. I attempted to grab his arms and redirect him towards the ground.
So you went hands-on again.
Yes, I did.
Was Mr. Carter still at the corner?
Yes, he was standing in the corner.
Were you still telling him to get on the ground?
Yes, I was.
So when you went hands-on this time, what did the defendant do?
Unfortunately, when I went hands-on and attempted to redirect his body towards the ground, he grabbed momentum and took off running northbound on Orange Avenue.
Can you use a laser pointer and show us which direction he ran?
Yes.
Officer Cruz, how tall are you?
5'10",
How old are you?
31 years old,
And how much do you weigh?
approximately 192.
Is Mr. Carter taller than you?
Yes, he is.
Would you say that he's in better shape than you?
Yes, he is.
Were you able to tell that night, June 4th, 2015?
Yes, I did.
What about Officer Mays?
Officer Mays is an older gentleman in his 50s.
Did the defendant appear to be in better physical shape than Officer Mays?
Yes.
Once the defendant takes flight down Orange Avenue, what do you do?
I get on my radio and announce foot pursuit, and I also take pursuit.
Does Officer Mays take foot pursuit with you?
Yes, he does.
About how far does the defendant run?
Approximately 100 yards.
At some point, does the defendant slow down?
Yes, he does.
At some point, does the defendant cross the street?
Yes, he does.
Officer Cruz, can you take a look at the picture that's on the screen and show us where the defendant crosses the street?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, go ahead.
It was approximately in this area right here.
And what did the defendant do once he crossed the street?
He crossed the street and came over here and sat on the curb.
Thank you. Now, when you start running, do you begin to feel any of the effects of the pepper spray?
I do.
Can you tell us what those effects are?
Sure, it's a burning sensation and possibly also could feel as you cannot breathe.
Were you having a hard time breathing?
I was starting to feel burning effects in my eyes at that point.
At the time the defendant starts to take headlong flight down Orange Avenue, what are your concerns at this point?
Concerns are safety.
Safety of you?
Safety of I, yes.
Safety of others?
Yes, ma'am.
Who gets to the defendant first after he crosses the street and sits down?
Officer Mays does.
Where were you?
I was,
You can use the pointer.
sure. I followed Mr. Carter up the sidewalk here, and then he crossed, but there was traffic coming, so I had to stop and wait for traffic.
Could you see the defendant as he sat down?
There was some traffic passing. He did go across, and then I noticed he was sitting down once the traffic passed.
Did he have his hands up when he was sitting down?
Not that I recall.
Can you describe the way in which he was sitting?
He was sitting just on the curb, sitting up as if I was in the chair.
What did you do after you crossed the street?
Once I crossed the street, I went around to the back of Mr. Carter.
Did you attempt another method in an effort to gain compliance?
Yes.
And what was that?
At that point, I tried to push Mr. Carter down to the ground from behind him, so in order to put him in handcuffs.
Did he go to the ground?
No, he did not.
What did he do?
He tensed up and maintained his posture sitting up.
Were you still giving him verbal commands at this point?
Yes, I was.
What were those commands?
Stop resisting, put your hands behind your back.
Did he put his hands behind his back?
No, he did not.
At any point, did you hear the defendant say, "I give up"?
No.
After you attempted to push him to the ground and that didn't work, did you use yet another method in an effort to gain compliance?
Yes, I did.
And what did you use at this point?
At that point in time, I deployed my ass baton and I commenced striking Mr. Carter.
Where did you strike him?
I struck him in between the elbow and his shoulder.
Did you ever hit him in the face?
No.
Did you ever hit him in the head?
No.
Did you ever hit him anywhere else?
No. Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. Some strikes did hit his forearm because of him moving.
Would that be this part?
Yeah, that's between here.
Did your baton strikes seem to have any effect on the defendant?
They did not.
Are you still giving verbal commands at this point?
I am.
Are you still communicating over the radio?
At that point, I was attempting to, yes.
What were you asking for?
The units that were responding to us when we originally called foot pursuit could not locate us. And I was giving them better directions to our location.
Were you under the stress of the situation when you were talking over the radio?
Very much so, yes.
Were you describing the events as they were occurring?
On the radio,
Yes.
I was just letting them know what location we were at, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Officer Cruz, I'm showing you what's been pre-marked that states L for identification purposes only. Can you tell me if you recognize that?
I do.
And how do you recognize that?
My initials.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of the radio traffic from the night of June 4th, 2015?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move what's been pre-marked as states L for identification purposes only into evidence as states 9.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit L for identification will be received as State's Exhibit number 9.
Permission to publish to the jury.
You may.
Yes, we are.
That you want other officers to arrive on scene at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
That you need help?
Yes.
After calling for help and giving your location, did you attempt to gain compliance from the defendant again?
Yes, I did.
What did you do this time?
At that point, since none of our tools worked and physical contact wasn't working either, I attempted to put the subject in a bear hug and hold him down on the ground using my arms and legs in a grapple.
Now, I'm going to ask, and this might be hard, for you to describe that as best as possible, what you did. Can you do that?
I could try, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Subject was standing, Mr. Carter was sitting down in front. I came behind him as so and attempted to bear hug and come back on the ground. And in theory, I was attempting to wrap my legs around him, also pinning him down. Unfortunately, it did not work as planned.
Why did you try to do that?
None of our tools worked. I was out of taser cartridges. Aspeton wasn't effective. Neither was pepper spray.
Were you going to try to hold him there till backup arrived?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you feeling physically fatigued at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you still feeling the effects of the pepper spray?
Yes.
Were you able to get the defendant in a lock and hold him down?
I was able to get the defendant across his chest and shoulders locked in and pushed back, but unfortunately he fell on top of me and pinned my legs in with my belt. I couldn't wrap my legs around him.
Did it feel as if he was pushing his weight on you?
Yes.
What were your concerns at this point?
At that point, I had no movement of ability to roll out of it or even get up. I had no control of my tool belt either.
Were you concerned that the defendant could have access to your tool belt?
If he was at a position of advantage, being on top of me, yes.
Did you still have your gun in your tool belt?
Yes, it was still holstered.
At any point, up until the defendant's pinning you to the ground on the sidewalk, did you ever threaten to shoot the defendant?
No, I did not.
Did you ever threaten to use your firearm on the defendant?
No, I did not.
Did you ever unholster your firearm?
No, I did not.
Did you ever take your
Objection, Your
firearm?
Honor, leading.
Sustained. At any point, did you take your firearm out of the holster?
No.
At any point, did you see Officer Mays take his firearm out of the holster?
No, I did not.
At any point, did you see Officer Mays or hear Officer Mays threaten to shoot the defendant?
No, I did not.
What does Mays do after the defendant is able to pin you to the ground?
Officer Mays noticed, obviously, I'm in distress. I have no control of my body other than my arms are attempting to be across Mr. Carter's shoulders and chest. At that point, he comes over Mr. Carter in an attempt to get him off of me.
Is he able to get Mr. Carter off of you?
No, he wasn't able to get Mr. Carter off of me.
What do you see Mr. Carter do when Officer Mays tries to get him off of you?
Mr. Carter strikes Officer Mays in the chest.
At some point while Officer Mays is struggling with the defendant, are you able to roll out from under the defendant?
I do roll out to my right, yes.
After you're able to get out from under the defendant, what does Officer Mays do?
Officer Mays deploys his department-issued taser at Mr. Carter.
Does that seem to have any effect?
It appeared it did, and then it did not.
Why do you say it did not?
The probes did strike that deployed from the taser, but Mr. Carter pulled them out.
How did he pull him out?
He grabbed one hand and pulled the probes out.
Was he still sitting down when he did this?
He was not sitting down. He was up forward.
After the defendant has now pulled the taser prongs out of his chest, what did you decide to do?
At that point in time, I decided to deliver several kicks.
Why?
We have used everything on our tool belt. Taser cartridges. We have no more taser cartridges. We use pepper spray. We use asbatons. None of it had effects, and at the time, is the only thing I could come up with just to buy us time for other officers to get on scene to help us. And it maintains a safe distance between Mr. Carter and I.
Did you feel like you were out of options at this point?
I didn't have any other options, no.
Was either you or Officer Mays giving verbal commands as the kicks were being delivered?
Officer Mays was.
Was the defendant complying?
No, he was not.
At any point while you're delivering the kick strikes, do you hear the defendant say, "Stop," or "I give up"?
No.
Does the defendant ever put his hands behind his back?
No, he does not.
What does the defendant do with his body while you're giving the kick strikes to his arm?
He braces his left arm on the sidewalk so his body doesn't fall over as I'm delivering the kicks.
At any point, do you intentionally kick Mr. Carter in the head?
No.
What is Officer Mays doing while you're delivering the kick strikes?
Officer Mays is reloading his taser cartridge.
Does he deploy his taser for a second time?
Yes, he does.
Does this have any effect?
Yes, it does.
What does the defendant do at this point?
Mr. Carter falls on his back.
And do you tell him to roll into his stomach?
Yes, I do.
More than once?
I told him that once and put his hands behind his back a few times.
Did he eventually roll into his stomach?
Yes, he did.
Did he put his hands behind his back?
Eventually he did, yes, after several commands.
Were you able to secure him in handcuffs?
I did handcuff him using the prone handcuffing position.
Did you ever touch or strike Mr. Carter after you were able to secure him in handcuffs?
Once I secured him in handcuffs, I stood up and regained my own composure and strength and being, and no, I did not have any further contact with him.
Did you have to use any other responses to resistance after you got him in handcuffs?
No, I did not.
Did you see whether Officer Mays touched or struck the defendant after he was in handcuffs?
I couldn't tell, ma'am, because I was covered in pepper spray completely and my face and my body was beginning to burn.
Did backup arrive at some point?
They arrived as I was handcuffing Mr. Carter.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? You may. Officer Cruz, I am showing what's been pre-marked as Stage J for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize that?
My initials are located on the disc.
Did you watch this video?
Yes, I did.
And what does this video show?
It's a depiction of Mr. Carter when he ran across the street and sat down on the curb.
And is this a fair and accurate depiction of the events that occurred on the curb?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, this time the statement move has been pre-marked as Stage J for identification purposes only into evidence as Stage 10.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibit J for identification received as States Number 10.
Permission to publish?
You may.
this Mr. Carter?
Yes,
Is this you?
yes.
What are you doing at this point in the video?
At that point in time, delivering message on insurance.
Where are you at this point in the video?
I'm in the under Mr. Carter,
Who's the individual standing up?
Officer Mace.
Now, we saw an individual roll out. Is that you? And is that you delivering the insurance?
Yes,
Is that back of the right?
yes.
Yes.
You can leave. Okay.
It's cold.
Officer Cruz, did you write a report in this case?
Yes, I did.
In fact, you wrote two. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What were the two reports that you wrote? What are they called?
One, the first one that I wrote that I completed that night was a charging affidavit.
What is that?
The charging affidavit is a document which we list the charges and in order for the defendant, Mr. Carter, to be accepted into the jail.
Is that something that has to be done immediately?
Yes, it is.
Would that charging affidavit possibly contain less information than your second report?
Correct. Per statute, all a charging affidavit has to contain is probable cause.
Is it typical to write a charging affidavit and then follow up later with a lengthier report?
Yes.
Did you also write a lengthier report?
I did.
And what is that report called?
It's called the Orlando Police Department Incident Report.
Do you recall when you wrote that?
Yes, I do.
When did you write that?
I wrote it immediately the next day.
Prior to writing your field report, the longer one, did anyone tell you to review any video?
The only video I was provided to review was a cell phone video taken from a balcony.
Who told you to review it?
I received a phone call and an email from a captain,
Who's the captain?
Captain Sue Brown.
Did Sergeant Gillespie ever tell you to review video?
On the night of the incident, yes.
Is that a typical practice?
Yes, it is.
And why?
Many officers are equipped with body cameras now, and there's also a lot of places that have video, and in order to reflect accurate depiction of the events, we're requested to review video.
Were you able to review any video before writing your field report?
No, only that one.
Which one?
Was the one taken from an apartment complex balcony.
What did that show?
It showed me kicking Mr. Carter while he was sitting up on the curb.
Now, Officer Cruz, On your field report, there is a box with a date of June 9th, 2015. What does that date signify?
That's the date the APS arrest package report was completed, and I signed and notarized it.
Is it fair to say that's not the date you wrote it?
That's correct.
It's just the date that you were able to get it notarized and sent over?
Yes, ma'am.
Did anyone at any point tell you to put anything in your report that was untruthful?
No. No.
Did anyone ever tell you you needed to add or edit your report?
No.
Officer Cruz, are you aware that citizens are able to make complaints about officers to the Orlando Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Officer Cruz, are you aware that citizens can write complaints to Orlando Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
More specifically, were you aware of whether any citizen had written a complaint involving excessive force against you prior to June 4th, 2015?
No, I was not.
So if there was one, you never had an opportunity to give a statement?
That's correct.
You were never questioned about it?
That's correct.
Sometime after June 4th, 2015, did you become aware that there had been a citizen complaint involving excessive force lodged against you?
Yes.
Did you ever have an opportunity to provide a statement in that?
No.
Were you ever questioned from any supervisor about that?
No.
Did you ever receive any disciplinary action in response to that?
No.
As far as you know, was the complaint closed without any discussion with you whatsoever?
That's correct.
Now, I want to tie up a few loose ends with you, Officer Cruz. When the defendant turned around and lunged at you as you were trying to dry stun him, did it appear as though he was intentionally trying to touch your hand?
Yes.
And let's back up even further. When you initially saw the defendant and Mrs. Fajo in front of the trophy shop, and you saw the defendant grab a hold of Mrs. Fajo's arm as she attempted to walk away, did you have enough probable cause at that point to arrest for battery?
Yes and no.
Why do you say no?
No, because at that point I didn't know it was specifically a domestic situation.
Does it have to be domestic for it to be a battery?
No.
Based on what you saw, did you make the decision to investigate it further?
Yes.
Why?
Under state of Florida domestic violence laws, we have something that's called dating violence. upon questioning Mrs. Spejo, it fell under the pretenses of dating violence. And at that point in time, the state is considered the victim of the crime, no longer the victim. And we do not ask victims of dating violence, domestic violence, if they desire
I'm
prosecution.
going to back you up, Officer Cruz. You didn't know if they were dating when you first saw them
No.
grab her arm.
Correct.
And when you saw him grab your arm, you still decided that you needed to walk over there and talk to them.
Correct.
Did you feel that based on what you saw, you needed to investigate?
Yes, ma'am.
That it was potentially a battery?
Yes.
Why did you choose to strike this portion of the arm with the baton?
Yes, ma'am. During defensive tactic techniques and under response to resistance, these areas which we have are specifically located that we are taught and trained to strike. So in order to cause less possible impact damage to the person.
Is this a meatier portion of the body?
It is a meatier portion of the body.
Is that the same reason you delivered the kick strikes there?
Yes, ma'am.
When you're working off duty, do you have the power and authority to arrest individuals?
Yes, I do.
Are you able to perform your regular duties as if you were working a regular shift as a police officer?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that include investigating a potential situation?
We're required by policy to take law enforcement action upon any site of criminal crime or city ordinance violation.
A moment to confer. No further questions.
Questions from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.